to start with a couple stories, and it begins in the summer of 1999, when I was 11 years old. My family moved from Chino Hills, which is in LA County, to Escondido, which is in San Diego County, because of my dad's job. And that August, I started middle school, which, as you all know, is a fun time. And the only thing I remember from my first day was lunch. I didn't know anyone. Most of the kids had gone through elementary school together, and they all knew each other and sat together. I went through the cafeteria, got a cheeseburger. Note, I never ate at the cafeteria ever again. And I sat by myself at a table and ate alone. And I don't remember exactly how it happened, but not too long after that first lunch, I met a girl, and it turned out that she would end up being my best friend. We're still best friends, despite the fact that she lives in Oregon. She was also the person that introduced me to the church that would eventually get me started on my journey toward ministry. And then in 2006, I graduated from high school, and for some crazy reason that I still haven't quite figured out, I moved to Japan to go to college. I was so incredibly homesick those first 2 weeks that I was literally homesick. During those first few weeks, I was eating lunch in the cafeteria, something about cafeterias, and another woman sat across from me and started taking pictures of her sandwich. And I asked her, I was like, why in the world are you taking pictures of your sandwich? And it turned out that there was some really funny saying on it that had been a mistranslation, and so the English was really hysterical, and so she was taking a picture of it. And from that day on, we became fantastic friends. We helped each other get through that year, because we had both been away from home for the first time, and were able to just be there for each other. And we're still good friends. I was at her wedding a couple summers ago, and we went on a road trip, and we just formed this relationship out of that one encounter. The summer of 2010, I graduated from college. I was living in Richmond, Virginia. I moved to a new city so that I could start seminary. I was in a new area, in a new house, with new roommates I'd never met before, a new job, starting a new school, and I had an incredibly difficult time handling all of that transition. My new roommate was the one who helped me through all of it, even though he had no idea who I was. And again, I have another new best friend. I'll be in his wedding next summer. And so the idea of strangers here is interesting. We think of strangers as people we have never met before. Usually there's some kind of negative connotation around strangers. We learn stranger danger as children. Never talk to strangers, cross the street to avoid walking past strangers who might look a little suspicious. We're taught, whether directly or indirectly, what bad or dangerous people look like and how to avoid them. Yet in this text, Jesus is the stranger. In ancient Israel, there were very few modes of transportation, so it wasn't unusual for strangers to meet on the road and walk together. What was unusual was for someone to chastise his fellow travelers and then expound on the scriptures for what probably seemed like a really long time, going all the way from Moses to his time. And then without even knowing who he was yet, those strangers asked Jesus to stay with them. Stay and eat with us, they told him. They offered him hospitality, and in return, they were blessed by him being there. They were able to see the resurrected Jesus and fully understand the meaning of what had happened, not only on that day, but the 3 days earlier. What would have happened had these travelers written off the stranger and let him keep on walking? They could have ignored him, they could have told him to go away, they could have crossed to the other side of the street to avoid him, but instead they walked and they talked with him, even though he seemed like a crazy person who didn't know what had just happened in Jerusalem. And even after all of that, they still invited him to their home for a meal. As I mentioned, in the ancient world, people walked almost everywhere that was reachable by land. But today, most of us travel by car. We don't have these same types of interactions. We do, however, encounter a lot of strangers every day. Sometimes those interactions are short, have no long-term effects. Other times we meet people and they end up meaning the most to us. I recently finished a book for my urban leadership class called Cosmopolitanism by Kwame Appiah, and in it he talks about having a mindset of living in a global tribe. In this day and time, we are all connected, especially in ways we can't see. Appiah encourages his readers to think about how our interactions affect other people. He encourages us to see each other not through our similarities in identity, but through our differences. That is how we are connected. We are certainly connected to those who are similar to us. We're in the same family, we live in the same area, go to the same school, work, same places to eat, we go to church together. But what about those who aren't like us? What about the stranger who comes up to us on the street and asks for some spare change? What about the person who sits across from us from the train every morning? What about the clerk at the store, who we see all the time but never say anything to? What about that person sitting next to you in the cafeteria? Will we ask them to stay with us? Will we let them become a part of our lives and see what happens? We certainly can't expect that everyone we meet is going to have a great impact on our lives, but we also shouldn't hold back. We could miss out on an amazing experience that will change our lives, even if it is just in that moment. I encourage you to think about the people you come in contact with all the time yet don't really know. Can you get to know them? Can you ask them to stay with you a little while and get more acquainted? I want to challenge you, as a stranger, to ask people to stay, to see what happens. You may just get to meet the risen Jesus. And now I want to do something different that I've never done before, but this setup makes it really easy to do. I'd like for us to have some discussions together in our groups. Yeah, we got enough groups, I think we can do it. So I have some questions, and I'd like you to talk about them amongst each other for like 10 minutes, and then we can come back together and have a little bit of discussion as a large group before we move on to communion. So some pretty simple questions. I would like for you to talk about anyone that you have ever met who was a stranger and ended up meaning more to you. I'm going to think about how that happened. And then I want you to think about some ways that you can ask people who are strangers to stay with you. What are some ways you can show hospitality to those people that are in your lives who are strangers and maybe won't be double one? So go ahead and talk amongst yourselves and